My son-in-law's exact words were, "We got married yesterday, only special people, no one to embarrass the family." A week later, he texted me, "Send me the rent money." I did. Because I still didn't know the whole truth. Stick around, because what I found out after that call changed everything, and if you're watching, drop the city you're tuning in from. I'm Martin. I'm 62 years old, and until last October, I thought I'd already survived the worst life could throw at me. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning when my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, knocked on my door glowing with excitement, scrolling through her phone. "Martin, I had no idea Stella was getting married. The photos are gorgeous." She turned the screen toward me, and there was my daughter in a white dress, beaming beside her boyfriend, Albert, in a tuxedo. Surrounded by 50 well-dressed strangers at some upscale venue I'd never seen. Posted yesterday. My legs went weak. My only daughter had gotten married, and I found out from a neighbor. I called Stella straight to voicemail. I called Albert instead. He answered like I was interrupting something trivial. "Yeah, we got married. Small thing. Only special people, didn't want anyone there who might embarrass the family." Embarrass the family. I stood in the kitchen where I'd made her breakfast every morning after her mother died, where I'd bandaged her knees, helped with her homework, and apparently I was now an embarrassment. I'd spent 35 years as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant. Honest work that paid for Stella's college, her car, her first apartment. Not good enough, apparently, for the wedding of the year. "Where's Stella? I want to talk to her." Sleeping, the honeymoon in Napa wore her out. A honeymoon. While I sat home not knowing I even had a son-in-law. That night I replayed the last 2 years in my head. Stella and I used to be close. After her mother died when she was 16, it was just us. Weekly calls, inside jokes. Then Albert showed up, and slowly the calls thinned out. When I did see her, he was always there, steering the conversation, needling me about my old car, my outdated house, my plain clothes. "It's European, Martin. You probably wouldn't understand," he'd said once about a coffee machine, and Stella had laughed along. I hadn't noticed the pattern building until it was already finished. I'd been eased out, one small comment at a time. That evening, Stella finally called. "Daddy," small voice, no real apology. Just an explanation. Albert's family paid for the wedding and they had expectations. Not one word about love, just money and image. "It's not about deserving, Daddy. It's about fitting in." I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing the empty seat where I should have sat, the walk down the aisle we'd never have. And underneath the grief, something else started to grow, a quiet, cold clarity. If I didn't matter enough to be there, maybe it was time to reconsider how much she should matter to me. I had no idea how right that instinct was. 1 week later, the text came from Albert. "Send me the rent money." No hello, no apology for the wedding, just a demand like it was owed to him. I called Stella, confused. "You've been helping with rent since June," she said, like I already knew. I didn't. She told me that money was for her struggling student loans. Now, suddenly, it was rent. "I just simplified the situation," she said when I called her out. Simplified, meaning lied, for 4 straight months, while living in the very apartment where they'd secretly planned their wedding. I pulled my bank statements. June, student loans. July, a medical emergency that was actually Albert's dental work. August, car repairs that turned out to be new rims for his BMW. Nearly $7,800 of my retirement savings, funneled into their lifestyle while I was too embarrassing to receive a wedding invitation. When I told Albert no more money, his tone flipped instantly from bored to furious. "We're family. You have responsibilities." Responsibilities from the man who'd called me an embarrassment 2 weeks earlier. Stella called back in tears, begging, still not once apologizing for what she'd done, only for getting caught. That night I did something I should have done from the start. I went digging. Mrs. Henderson mentioned her sister had counted 60 guests in the wedding photos, and that the venue, Grand View Estate, ran about $20,000 to book. Orchids worth thousands. Nothing about the small, embarrassment-free wedding Albert described. I found Stella's Instagram, the one she'd never shared with me, full of photos captioned about her perfect families, with comments praising Albert's parents for throwing the wedding of the century. Albert's parents had paid for all of it. The same parents who apparently decided I didn't meet their standards. I called my neighbor Jim, whose son worked at the gallery where Stella claimed she was barely scraping by. Turned out she was making close to $60,000 a year on a management track, more than I'd ever made. I drove past their apartment the next morning, not some modest place struggling to make ends meet, but a luxury complex with a doorman and valet parking. My $1,200 wasn't covering their rent. It was covering less than half. When I asked Stella directly, she admitted the real number, $2,800 a month. Albert had been unemployed since April, 2 full months before they'd even asked me for help, meaning they'd tried to sustain that lifestyle alone first, and only brought me in once the money ran out. Albert's own wealthy parents refused to bail him out because they didn't believe in enabling dependency. But somehow, my enabling was expected, deserved even. That night, I researched elder financial exploitation for the first time in my life. Everything I read described exactly what was happening to me, legitimate-sounding emergencies at first, escalating demands, a partner recruited to keep the story consistent, guilt used as leverage. It was a pattern, and I realized for the first time in months that I actually held the power in this situation. The only question was what I'd do with it. They showed up in person that Saturday. Albert sat down on my own couch like he owned it. "This financial tantrum needs to stop. Family helps family." I asked what I got in return for helping. "The satisfaction of helping your daughter." I asked what level of life he thought made me small. "A 15-year-old car. A house you're proud you paid for yourself," while he hadn't held a job in 6 months. Eventually, the mask slipped completely. "My parents cut me off because they think I'm irresponsible. Stella's job isn't enough. You're the only one willing to provide," he said. Finally, honest cruelty. I told him plainly, "So I'm not family, Albert, I'm a resource." They left furious. That night I called my brother Robert, who asked me one simple question that cut straight through the fog. "Is she still acting like your daughter?" I already knew the answer. The next morning I mailed Stella a letter. No more money for any reason until she was ready for an honest relationship with her father. I told her I loved her, but I wouldn't be used anymore. 2 weeks later, they were pounding on my door at 7:30 in the morning. Albert waved the letter in my face, calling it a financial tantrum. Stella cried about losing their home. I told her plainly, it was never her home if she couldn't afford it without my money. Then Albert crossed a line I hadn't expected, a threat thinly disguised as reality. "When you're old and need help, who do you think takes care of you? Family relationships are reciprocal. If you don't help us now, don't expect us around later." I looked at Stella, hoping she'd push back. Instead, she nodded along. "I think we did what we had to do to survive," she said. Survive in a luxury apartment on ski trips and wine budgets. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a desperate young couple caught in a rough patch. This was a calculated strategy, and Albert had trained my own daughter to see me as a wallet instead of a father. I told them both to leave. That evening, I called a lawyer, not out of spite, but to protect what I had left and to make sure that if anything happened to me, my assets wouldn't automatically fall into the hands of people who had already proven they couldn't be trusted with them. 6 months of silence followed. Peaceful mornings, coffee with neighbors, my garden, my self-respect slowly returning. Then on a Tuesday in April, a detective called. "Sarah Chen, County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about your daughter. We've received reports of elder financial abuse, and your name came up as a potential victim. She came to my house and told me Albert had done this before at least 4 times. To previous partners' family members, amounts ranging from $5,000 to over $30,000. Always the same playbook: manufactured hardship, borrowed urgency, emotional blackmail." Then she told me the part that actually knocked the wind out of me. Stella had gone to the police herself 3 weeks earlier, not to confess, but to report that Albert had been financially abusing me without her knowledge. She was filing for divorce, and her lawyer was already building the story that she'd been manipulated into it, an innocent bystander rather than a willing partner. I told the detective the truth. Stella made every one of those calls herself. She invented the stories herself. She wasn't Albert's victim, she was his partner. 3 days later, Stella asked to meet me at the park where I used to take her to feed the ducks as a little girl. She looked thinner, older. She wanted to know if I'd tell the police she was involved. I told her I wouldn't press charges, but I wouldn't lie for her either. If you tell them I was involved, I could lose everything, she said. You should have thought of that before you lied to your father for 4 months, but I'm your daughter, are you? Because daughters don't usually treat their fathers the way you treated me. She asked, finally, if we could rebuild something after all this. I told her the truth. That depended entirely on who she decided to become. 6 months later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Albert had pleaded guilty to elder fraud and gotten probation with restitution orders. Stella avoided criminal charges, but lost her job once the investigation went public. They moved away, separately, Albert back to his parents, Stella into a smaller apartment she could actually afford. I never heard from either of them again, though I did hear, secondhand, that she'd ended up in a legal aid office asking about bankruptcy. I felt sad hearing that. Not because I wanted to step in and fix it, because some lessons only ever get learned the hard way, and this one had cost her everything that actually mattered. As for me, I found something I hadn't expected: peace. Real peace, the kind that only comes after you finally draw a line and hold it. I started volunteering at the senior center, helping other older adults spot the same manipulation I'd nearly missed in my own family. I made new friends, people who valued my company, not my bank account. I even started traveling a little, something I could never afford while I was quietly funding someone else's lifestyle. I'm 63 now, and for the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. Not because I have everything I want, but because I got back the one thing I'd lost without even realizing it: my self-respect. Family isn't blood, and it isn't obligation. It's honesty. It's respect. It's people who would never dream of excluding you from what matters or treating you like a line item in their budget. I have that now with people I chose. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is stop enabling them to hurt you and let them finally face what they built. So I'll ask you the same thing I've been asking myself. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between loving someone and protecting yourself from them? Tell me in the comments, and stick around, because I've got 2 more stories waiting that our regulars say are some of the best on this channel.